Shuddha Bhakta Charana Renu Bharana Anukula Shuddha Bhakta Charana Renu Bharana Anukula Bhakta Seva Parama Siddhi Premalati Koromula Bhakta Seva Parama Siddhi Premalati Koromula Madhavati ti bhakti janani jatane palana kori Krishna basati basati boli parama adare bori Goramara Jisabostane Koralo Bhamanarange Sesabostana Heriboami Panai Bhakta Sange Mridanga Bhaja Sunite Mana Abasara Sadajache Gauravita Kirtana Suni Anande Hridaya Nache Jugala Murti Dekhiya Mora Parama Ananda Hoya Prasada Seva Korite Hoya Sakala Prapancha Jaya Jedina Grihe Bhajana Dekhi Grihete Goloka Bhaya Charana Siddhu Dekhiya Ganga Sukana Simana Paya Tulasi Dekhi Guraya Prana Madhavatoshani Jani Gora Priya Saka Sevane Jivana Sartakamani Bhakti Vino Krishna Bhajane Anukula Payaja Prati Divase Paramasuke Shikara Karayeta Suddha Bhakata Charana Renu Bhajana Anukula Bhakata Seva Paramasiddhi Premalati Karamula Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to devotional service, while service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creeper of divine love. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadasi and Janmashtami, for they are the model of devotion. As my dwelling place, I choose with the greatest of reverence and love the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna. All those places where my Lord Govinda traveled for pastimes, I will visit in company of loving devotees. My mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the Mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of kirtan ordained by Lord Gaurachandra, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple Srila Hare Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's Prasad, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Goloka Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is a river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord, my happiness knows no bounds. The sight of the holy Tulasi tree soothes my soul, for I know she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring Sak, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Whatever Bhaktivinoda obtains that is conducive for the service of Lord Krishna, he accepts every day with the greatest of joy. Hare Krishna, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. So today I'm reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam, written by Saswat Das Goswami. This is a volume 4 entitled In Every Town and Village and Around the World from 1968 to 1971. This is chapter entitled A Threat Against ISKCON. Chapter 3. Under Prabhupada's personal direction, the Los Angeles Center became a model for the rest of ISKCON. At the morning Bhagavatam class, for example, he had the devotees responsively chant the Sanskrit mantras after him, and he asked that this become the standard program in all his temples. In May 1970, he wrote to each of the 26 temple presidents throughout North America and Europe, inviting them to visit him at Los Angeles. Quote from his letter: Now at the present moment, I am concentrating my energy in this Los Angeles center as ideal for all other centers in respect of deity worship, aratic, kirtan, and other necessary paraphernalia. As I have curtailed my moving program, I wish that you may come here at your convenience and stay here for a few days and see personally how things are going on. And by meeting with me personally for necessary instruction, I hope simultaneously in all centers the activities will be of the same standard. End of quote. The temple presidents who visited Prabhupada, most of them young men in their 20s, came with practical as well as philosophical questions. They came with their notebooks, writing down everything from the temple schedule to color schemes, noting the tunes used in the kirtans, learning how to manage a Sankirtan party, and perhaps most important of all, they would note the things Prabhupada did and the words he spoke personally to them. The temple presidents would then return to their own centers in Berkeley or Hamburg or Toronto or Sydney, glowing with ecstasy and ready to implement dozens of new standards they had imbibed from Prabhupada at the Los Angeles World Headquarters. Although Prabhupada still spoke of expanding his movement more and more, he seemed content to stay in Los Angeles, reaching the rest of the world through the temple presidents, his Sankirtan parties, and his books. New plans were unfolding, however, and Prabhupada again spoke of a governing body, 12 handpicked disciples to manage all of ISKCON's affairs. He also spoke of initiating more sannyasis and taking them with him to India to train as itinerant preachers. And to ensure that his books were regularly and properly printed, he wanted to form a special committee in charge of book publication. Sometimes managing his worldwide religious movement, sometimes leading the growing group of devotees in chanting Sanskrit mantras in the Los Angeles temple, and sometimes sitting alone and translating in the pre-dawn hours. Prabhupada lived happily in Los Angeles. One day, a record arrived from London. The London devotees, who with George Harrison's help had already produced an album, had now also released a new single, Govinda. Sri Sri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan ki jai, Sri Sri Jagannath Subhadra Baladev ki jai. The song consisted of verses Prabhupada had taught them from Brahma Samhita, each verse ending with a refrain, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Prabhupada asked the record be played during the morning program in the temple. The next morning, after he had entered the temple room, bowed down before the deity and taken his seat on the Vyasasana to begin the class, the record began. Suddenly, Prabhupada became stunned with ecstasy. His body shivered and tears streamed from his eyes. The devotees, feeling a glimmer of their spiritual master's emotion, began to chant Hare Krishna as if chanting in japa. The moments seemed to pass slowly. Finally, Prabhupada spoke, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He was again silent. Then he asked, Is everyone all right? The response was a huge roar, Jai Prabhupada. And he began the Srimad Bhagavatam class. Vaishnava Kriyamudra Vigyena Bhujai. No one can understand the mind of a Vaishnava. Only a pure devotee can understand another pure devotee perfectly. But by observing the main activities of Prabhupada's life, we can see that whatever he did was pure service to Lord Krishna, and was a perfect example of how to surrender to Krishna. He taught by precept and by example, often encouraging, even praising his disciples. He always pushed them into more and more participation in the blissful Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. But he also exposed the faults of his disciples, and these faults were sometimes great and painful to see, both for him and for his disciples. One day, as Prabhupada came into his quarters at the Los Angeles temple, he saw that one of the devotees cleaning his room had placed his picture upside down. A simple mistake, but it indicated something wrong in the disciples' mentality. Every morning, the devotees sing prayers to the spiritual master, honoring him as the direct representative of God. How could any sincere disciple not notice that he is standing God's representative upside down? Then a more serious discrepancy. Prabhupada went to the temple, greeted the deities, and went to take Lilamritam, the scented water from the bathing of the deities. It was part of his daily schedule. After his morning walk, he would return to the temple and offer obeisances to the deities while the Govinda record was being played. A devotee would then offer him a few drops of Charanamrita in his right palm, and he would sip it. He had mentioned this item of devotional service in the Nectar of Devotion. Scented with perfumes and flowers, the water comes gliding down through his lotus feet and is collected and mixed with yogurt. In this way, this Charanamrita not only becomes very tastefully flavored, but also has tremendous spiritual value. The devotees who come to visit and offer respect to the deity take 3 drops of Charanamrita very submissively and feel themselves happy in transcendental bliss. This is an excerpt from a book, Nectar of Devotion. On this particular morning, however, as Srila Prabhupada took Charanamrita, he frowned. Someone had put salt in it. He walked the length of the temple room, took his seat on the Vyasasana, and before a room full of 100 devotees, asked, "Who has put salt in the Charanamrita?" A young girl in a sari stood, and with a nervous smile said she had done it. "Why have you done it?" Prabhupada asked gravely. "I don't know," she giggled. Prabhupada turned to Gargamuni. "Get someone responsible." Everyone present felt Prabhupada's anger. The unpleasant moment marred the pure temple atmosphere. A disciple worships Krishna by pleasing Krishna's representative, the spiritual master. Therefore, to displease the spiritual master was a spiritual disqualification. The spiritual master was not merely a principle, he was a person, Srila Prabhupada. When ISKCON Press in Boston misprinted Prabhupada's name on a new book, he became deeply disturbed. The small paperback chapter from the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam bore his name on the cover as simply A.C. Bhaktivedanta. Omitted was the customary His Divine Grace, as well as Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's name stood almost divested of spiritual significance. Another ISKCON Press publication described Prabhupada as Acharya of ISKCON. Although Prabhupada had repeatedly emphasized that he was the founder of Acharya. There had been many Acharyas or spiritual masters, and there would be many more, but His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, was the sole founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. To make matters worse, when Prabhupada first opened the new Bhagavatam chapter, the binding cracked and the pages fell out. Prabhupada glowered. The devotees in Boston, hearing of Prabhupada's anger, knew at once that their mistake in misprinting Srila Prabhupada's name was a serious oversight. Minimizing the spiritual master's position was a grave offense, and they had even published the offense. The serious implications were difficult for the devotees to face, and they knew they would have to rectify their mentality before they could make spiritual progress. Prabhupada criticized the mentality behind these mistakes, and his criticisms were instructive to his disciples. Unless he instructed them about the absolute position of the spiritual master, how would they learn? At the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam class, one morning, Prabhupada called on one of the women devotees, Nandarani. She stood respectfully. "Do you chant 16 rounds every day?" "Well, I try to, Prabhupada." "This is the problem," Prabhupada said, turning to the temple president. If Nandarani, one of the senior responsible women, wasn't chanting regularly, then certainly the new women under her were not either. This was the manager's fault. Prabhupada had praised and encouraged his disciples for laboring hard to renovate the temple and for going out daily into the streets to chant and distribute magazines. But for a devotee to not chant the prescribed rounds was to neglect the most important instruction. What Nandarani had not said was that the temple authorities had told her that chanting all her 16 rounds was not necessary, as long as she worked. They had told her this, even though Prabhupada clearly instructed his disciples at initiation to always chant at least 16 rounds daily. Then another incident. During the morning class, Prabhupada was discussing Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, an associate of Lord Chaitanya. Looking among the devotees, he asked, "Who can tell me who is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya?" No one spoke. Prabhupada waited. "None of you can tell me who is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya?" he asked. One girl raised her hand. She had read something about him. That was all. "Aren't you ashamed?" Prabhupada looked at the men. "You should be the leaders. If the men cannot advance, then the women cannot advance. You must be brahmanas. Then your wives will be brahmanas. If you are not brahmanas, then what can they do?" Without improving their chanting and without reading Krishna conscious literature, Prabhupada said, they would never attain the purity necessary for preaching Lord Chaitanya's message. While the local anomalies were weighing heavily on Srila Prabhupada, he learned of strange things his disciples in India had written in their letters, and he became more disturbed. One letter to devotees in America reported that Prabhupada's godbrothers in India objected to his title, Prabhupada. According to them, only Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati should be called Prabhupada, and they refer to Prabhupada as Swami Maharaj. Prabhupada also learned that some of his disciples were saying he was not the only spiritual master. They were interested in reading Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's books, as if to discover some new teaching Prabhupada had not yet revealed. Prabhupada regarded these remarks as dangerous for ISKCON. Advancement in spiritual life was based on implicit faith in the spiritual master, and to Prabhupada, these new ideas indicated a relative conception as opposed to the absolute conception of the spiritual master. Such a conception could destroy all he had established. At least he could destroy the spiritual life of anyone who held it. Though sometimes ignorant, his disciples, he knew, were not malicious. Yet these letters from India carried a spiritual disease transmitted by several of Prabhupada's godbrothers to his disciples there. Prabhupada had already been troubled when some of his godbrothers had refused to help him secure land in Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Although he had asked them to help his inexperienced disciples purchase land, they had not complied. In fact, some of them had worked against him. Prabhupada had written to one of his godbrothers, "I am so sorry to learn that there is a sort of conspiracy by some of our godbrothers as not to give me a place in Mayapur." Prabhupada was sensitive to any threat to ISKCON. His accepting the name Prabhupada, He is teaching that the disciple must approach the spiritual master as a direct representative of Krishna without attempting to jump over him to the previous spiritual masters. These things he had carefully explained to his disciples. But now a few irresponsibly spoken remarks in India were weakening the faith of some of his disciples. Perhaps this insidious contamination that was now spreading had precipitated the blunders at ISKCON Press and even the discrepancies in Los Angeles. Talks about the relative position of the spiritual master could only be the workings of Maya, the Lord's illusory energy. Maya was attempting to bewilder the devotees of ISKCON. That was her job, to lead the conditioned souls away from Krishna's service. The recent events began to hamper Prabhupada's writing. He had been working quickly in Los Angeles and had recently finished the second and final volume of Krishna. And on the very tape on which he had dictated the last chapter of Krishna, he had immediately begun a summary of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Gradually, however, his writing stopped. Karanda says, Prabhupada's translating would require a great deal of concentration. He would have 2 or 3 of his big Bhagavatam volumes opened up, and sometimes a number of other small books, which he would refer to for something or other. He would sit, wearing his glasses and speaking into his dictating machine, and he would be completely absorbed in reading. Sometimes he would make a brief note, then look into some of his books, then open another book, turn back to another page, make a note, and then dictate. It required a great deal of concentration. I think that's why Prabhupada did most of it at night, after he would rise from his late evening nap. From 1 or 2 in the morning until 6 or 7 in the morning, he would be absorbed. It was quiet at that time, and he could become absorbed. But when Prabhupada became disturbed about the problems in ISKCON, it inhibited his work. He was spending his time discussing with visiting devotees, or myself or whoever was there. Then he would spend more time thinking matters over or pondering the problem. And he would not be able to concentrate on his translating. These difficulties disturbed him, and he would think about them and say, I have not been able to concentrate. I have been thinking about this problem. End of quote. Although the spiritual master suffers for his disciples' mistakes, Prabhupada's perspective was not simply negative. He continued chanting and lecturing in the temple and inviting the leaders of his movement to visit him in the ideal center of Los Angeles. But he also corrected the diseased mentality wherever it appeared. When, for example, Guru Das wrote from London to say that they had allowed an Indian guest to lecture in the temple while sitting on Prabhupada's Vyasasan, Prabhupada immediately wrote back, correcting him. Quote from Prabhupada's letter. I am surprised how you allowed Mr. Parikh to sit on the Vyasasan. You know that Vyasasan is meant for the representative of Vyasadeva, the spiritual master. But Mr. Parikh does not come in the parampara to become the representative of Vyas. Neither does he have any sound knowledge of Vaishnava principles. I understand from your letter that sometimes discussions on Aurobindo philosophy are done by Mr. Parikh from the Vyasasan. So I am little surprised. How did you allow him like this? I think you should rectify immediately all these mistakes as stated by you in the last 2 lines of your letter. I think the best thing to do is to stop this class. Nonsense ought not to be tolerated. End of quote. In a letter from Paris, Tamal Krishna asked Prabhupada philosophical questions about the perfection of the spiritual master, and Prabhupada answered fully, but sternly. Quote from his letter, from Prabhupada's letter. A spiritual master is always liberated in any condition of his life. He should not be mistaken as an ordinary human being. This position of the spiritual master is achieved by 3 processes. One is called sadhana siddha. That means one who is liberated by executing the regulative principles of devotional service. Another is kripa siddha, one who is liberated by the mercy of Krishna or his devotee. And another is nitya siddha, who is never forgetful of Krishna throughout his whole life. These are the 3 features of the perfection of life. So far, Narada Muni is concerned, in his previous life he was a maidservant's son, but by the mercy of the devotees, he later on became Siddha, and next life he appeared as Narada, with complete freedom to move anywhere by the grace of the Lord. So even though he was in his previous life a maidservant's son, there was no impediment in the achievement of his perfect spiritual life. Similarly, any living entity who is conditioned can achieve the perfectional stage of life by the above-mentioned processes, and the vivid example is Narada Muni. So I do not know why you have asked about my previous life, whether I was subjected to the laws of material nature. So even though accepting that I was subjected to the laws of material nature, does it hamper in my becoming spiritual master? What is your opinion? From the life of Narada Muni, it is distinct that although he was a conditioned soul in his previous life, there was no impediment of his becoming the spiritual master. This law is applicable not only to the spiritual master, but to every living entity. So far I am concerned, I cannot say what I was in my previous life. But one great astrologer calculated that I was previously a physician and my life was sinless. Besides that, to corroborate the statement of Bhagavad Gita, Suchinam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Vijayate, which means an unfinished yogi takes birth in rich family or born of a Suchi or pious father. By the grace of Krishna, I got these 2 opportunities in the present life to be born of a pious father and brought up in one of the richest aristocratic families of Calcutta, Kasinath Malik. The Radha Krishna deity in this family called me to meet him, and therefore last time when I was in Calcutta, I stayed in the temple along with my American disciples. Although I had immense opportunities to indulge in the 4 principles of sinful life, because I was connected with a very aristocratic family, Krishna always saved me, and throughout my whole life, I do not know what is illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, or gambling. So far my present life is concerned, I do not remember any part of my life when I was forgetful of Krishna. End of quote. Prabhupada thought some of his leaders had become entangled in ISKCON management and were trying to gain control for themselves. In the classes, he would speak of this only indirectly, as he had when he had exposed that the devotees weren't chanting and reading enough. Consequently, most devotees were unaware of Prabhupada's anxiety. But occasionally, while sitting in his room or in the garden, Prabhupada would express his concern. He wanted his disciples to manage ISKCON, but to do so, they must be pure. Only then would he be able to concentrate on writing books. In June, he wrote to Brahmananda, excerpt from his letter. Now, my desire is that I completely devote my time in the matter of writing and translating books, and arrangements should now be done that our society be managed automatically. I think we should have a central governing body for dealing with important matters. I have already talked with Gargamuni about this. So if you come back by the Rath-Yatra festival, we can have a preliminary meeting at San Francisco in this connection. So we can end this reading here. This is a grave subject matter that is being described in this Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Amrita means very blissful, Lila, Lilamrita. But here Lila doesn't seem to be very blissful. But it is actually very important, if not blissful, it is certainly a very essential topic, as described by Satsvarup Das Goswami. He did not hesitate to write this in his book, which is meant even for the general public, because it is spiritual by nature. All the problems that Srila Prabhupada had to face as the founder Acharya of ISKCON are spiritual problems. And for that reason, they are certainly of permanent value. Not only Srila Prabhupada has to face these problems at that time, but certainly after Prabhupada, ISKCON continuing like this, the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go on like this. Certainly, the same problem or similar problem would be also coming out from time to time in ISKCON. Even after Prabhupada passing away in 1977, many new problems also had come, and they were discussed at the GBC level, and then some appropriate decisions were taken. So Srila Prabhupada very thoughtfully, he had decided that there should be a managing body for the whole of ISKCON, and he would entrust this responsibility to some of his senior disciples. So this is a very important decision. So not only Srila Prabhupada founded ISKCON, but he later on also he established a governing body of ISKCON. So we remember that when Prabhupada was preaching in Madras, at that time, the former president of India, Gopal Krishna, what's his name? No. Huh? Radha Krishna. He had a conversation with Srila Prabhupada, who called he's a very intelligent gentleman. And Mr. Radhakrishnan, he put a question to Prabhupada. Why did you form a society, ISKCON society. The previous acharyas, including, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the successors of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they never established any society like this. They were propagating the philosophy, they wrote books, they made disciples, they preached also, but they never established any society like this. Of course, he didn't know that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, even Jiva Goswami, he formed a society by the name, which I forgot, Jiva Goswami Society was. Anyway, so he was surprised that it is a spiritual endeavor. So while there should be some type of a society to be recognized by the government, it seems to be some type of a material development. And Srila Prabhupada understood the question, and he answered that it is very necessary to have ISKCON established so that we can deal with the governments and the administration in a proper manner, in an official manner. So that was Prabhupada knew very well that ISKCON was necessary to have a permanent basis which would be recognized by the government, and this way purchase land and do so many things. So here also, Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish the GBC. It is not that it is against the spiritual principle of ISKCON. Everybody understood that ISKCON founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada was the only authority to take any decision regarding ISKCON management. But Prabhupada felt that in course of time, so many centers have been established, so many new disciples, and therefore it would be necessary to have a governing body commission. So that would be the next step in Srila Prabhupada's mission, to establish a world headquarters in Mayapur with regular meetings with the governing body commission members and to decide about the important projects of ISKCON to be undertaken. And as we have read Srila Prabhupada's other problems, this is not Srila Prabhupada's problems. There's the problems of the neophyte disciples. In order to expand the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada had to give Diksha to many neophyte disciples, even though it may not be the best spiritual solution, as Srila Rupa Goswami has mentioned in his Bhakti Samrita Sindhu, that a spiritual master should not initiate too many disciples who are not competent, who are not qualified. But Srila Prabhupada was very, very merciful, and he knew that unless the number of disciples is multiplied, then the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cannot be developed. It will remain stagnant. Suppose Prabhupada initiates only there's a handful of disciples, then what can they do? They will not be able to expand the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so quickly. It may take a long time and Kali Yuga, is progressing more and more. Hardly there is only 10,000 years that may be favorable in Kali Yuga to spread the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in the mind of Srila Prabhupada, there was a sense of urgency, which may not be in the mind of some of his disciples. They will not be so anxious to spread the movement of Lord Chaitanya as much as Prabhupada, of course. They have no idea how to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. It is only by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, by his teachings, by his personal training, that some of his disciples became experts in preaching activities. Otherwise, they had no idea. So, Srila Prabhupada took the risk to preach extensively and to establish ISKCON, to initiate so many disciples in this way. And then finally, he will also establish BBT later on to look after the book printing in a very organized manner, and ISKCON GBC. So the other faults, to put salt in the Charanamrita, that may be something unique, maybe not maybe not that all the disciples would be doing like this. But like not chanting 16 rounds daily, falling short of the prescribed number of rounds, this was fairly common among disciples. And some of the disciples were telling that, Prabhupada, I'm so much engaged, I have so many duties. Like, for instance, Paramananda, I was reading some of the letters. Paramananda, he was looking after cows in New Vrindavan. So practically all day long, he has to look after cows. And for him, the chanting japa was very, it was difficult to concentrate on his japa. So he wrote to Srila Prabhupada that I'm not able to properly chant 16 rounds daily. So Prabhupada told him, you do as best as you can. You must look after the cows and also try to also finish your rounds every day. So some of the disciples also had told like this, I'm not able to chant 16 rounds daily. So Prabhupada, he could understand that is more of a laziness on the part of the disciple. So he would answer another type of letter telling that if any day you don't chant 16 rounds, you chant less, then the next day you can sleep less or spend less time in eating. In this way, you can make up for the number of rounds that you have not performed earlier. So that was another instruction of Srila Prabhupada. Generally, that was the instruction. If at all, any particular day, we cannot complete the rounds, then definitely we have to make sure that the next day we have to complete and make up for the loss of japa. So these are very important instructions that Srila Prabhupada had given. Any questions or comments? Oh, yes.
Prabhu, I was Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I met with accident some time back, 1 year back, Prabhuji, At the time, 3 months I was on the bed. So during that period, I was unable to chant, Prabhuji, because in the hospital it was not possible for me. So after 3 months, another 3 months, next 3 months, I tried to cover all the every day that 60 extra whatever I used to do, all those things I did. Is it okay, Prabhuji? Only next day we have to do.
Yeah, the general instruction Prabhupada gave is that the next day we should be careful and make some more time for chanting japa to compensate the lack of japa in the earlier day. That should be done immediately, not waiting for 3 months.
No, but I was because of some problems, pains were there. I was unable to chant. After
Yes.
3 months, I did all.
You
3
were in
months.
hospital. You were
Hospital.
You were
That I covered after 3 months. I covered every day. I used to chant 20 rounds more, Praji. Like that, I covered for 3 months, 3 more months. After that, I increased also. Is it okay, Praji, or only next day we have to do? That is my doubt, Praji.
Maybe in that case, Prabhupada also gave an instruction to one of the lady disciples, I forgot her name. I think maybe Jadurani or Ekayani, that she was also in hospital for a few days. So Prabhupada wrote a letter to her that don't be anxious. You chant your rounds, but it may not be possible with a japa in hand. But you chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra.
I did that.
So that was the instruction given by Srila Prabhupada. So if you chant constantly even while lying in the hospital bed, that will be valid.
Yes.
Even though you will not be able to count properly.
Yeah. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I did. One day I did.
Yes.
One day I did not.
So that is
like that. It happened.
That is approved.
It was irregular, Praji. Irregular.
That is approved by Prabhupada in one of his letters.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.